So Trav, we have Alexa and Roy with us for this episode, and they collectively make up the ROAMies. They are here to join in our conversation. So not the homies, the ROAMies.
Yeah,
right? That's it. So,
the ROAMies.
And yes, we have roamed to Sweden,
Yes.
so we have been there. So
That's
we
awesome.
feel you. We feel you.
That's it.
Yeah.
So guys, I wanted to hop in and have a little bit of a conversation because all three of you are tremendous songwriters in your own right. Trav, from your group days, right? Now, when you were in a group, did you write the songs, or were you just the superstar performer?
I was the main songwriter.
Okay.
Sometimes I can spark jealousy. Are we splitting the songs?
Oh, okay. There's splits always.
It was. I don't know how you guys do it, Rory. If there's some like domestic arguments there, but yeah, in a 5-man band R&B, I want my credit. If I'm not gonna be singing lead, then I want my full credit. I did sing.
Right.
I pinned a lot of the tunes.
Nice.
That's it.
Yeah.
So,
true superstar.
And Alexa and Rory are both songwriters in their own right, both in the ROAMies, and then also Rory, you do a lot of big band stuff. Do you do original composition in big band, or are you just sort of a cover guy?
Both. I do mostly covers that people are expecting, but I'm sort of like a cross between Harry Connick and Bublé, I suppose, in the fact that I throw in some originals as well.
I like those two comparables as references. A little Harry Connick, a little Bublé, and you kind of in the middle,
a little
right?
bit, and a lot of Ray Charles, baby.
That's it.
And he's really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. 100%, right? 100%. Well, and I'm now between you and Alexa, you, do you write most of the stuff for the ROAMies, or is and Rory's just your roadie, or how does that work?
That's how she runs the house.
That's it. That's it.
No, I feel like it's kind of half and half. We have some songs that I've written and we both sing, or he's written and we both sing. And, but the majority of our songs we try to write together.
Oh, that's cool.
Because one of the things is that we are so very different in our approach to songwriting. I'm very happy, and I'm very about keeping it happy and hooky. And
Not to say shallow.
Usually I have depth. But usually I write a little more vague, and Rory is very detailed and specifics and deep. Yes.
So Alexa, would you consider yourself? I'm gonna draw an analogy here. You would be the Joel Osteen writer, and he would be like the Kenneth Copeland.
Like little brother Copeland, just like super deep.
Heck of an analogy.
No, Rory's gonna be more.
Oh,
I'd put Rory more in the probably even more depressing.
Oh wow!
Side.
Okay.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Wow!
Who's a depressing pastor?
Yeah,
We're gonna
I
put on
know.
blast.
Did she just call Kenneth Copeland depressing? I think
No, I'm saying you're more.
more depressing, right? Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I've
Yeah.
heard some depressing
Right.
pastors before. We can make a list, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I prefer to think that I'm deep.
That's it. I like it. You're like a well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes,
he
thank
thinks
you.
that I'm shallow.
I gotcha.
So
Well,
there
that's why
you
you guys
go.
balance each other out. Right? So-
Sha-la-la-lo.
So the reason I gathered all of you all together is because just in the last couple of weeks we've had some heavyweight musicians and artists pass away, and it's been a real bummer. Bill Withers died, Kenny Rogers died, Joe Duffy died, and John Prine, Diffie, not Joe Duffy.
Yep.
I think he was Joe Duffy was the Major League Baseball.
You're talking to country fan, man.
I know,
Joe
right?
Diffie,
Yeah,
bro.
Joe Diffie. That's it. So I think Joe Duffy played in the major leagues. And then John Prine, right? John Prine died as well. With Joe Diffie and John Prine both dying of the coronavirus, which is a bummer. So I thought we could talk a little bit about them generally, and then kind of give some sort of storytelling and songwriting thoughts, and some approaches. We always like to keep everything value based. So for all those songwriters out there, it'd be good to talk about that a little bit as well. But Trav, like out of those four, Joe Diffie, John Prine, Kenny Rogers, and Bill Withers, which would you say you listen to the most?
Wow. So that's a great question.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, I think Kenny Rogers had to what's the one? The Gambler.
The Gambler.
So like that's a hood song, country hood song for like that crossed over to the hood. So we appreciate it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And just think like he would do so with Dolly Parton. So like you mentioned some like iconic people, but that he stood out, and that's who I would end up on my radio station, TV station the most.
Really? Okay. What about Bill Withers? Were you a Bill Withers fan?
I was. It wasn't like I liked Bill Withers, but I wasn't like a huge fan. It was more something that her grandmother listening to.
Yeah. Because he was this like a 70s guy, right? So Ain't No Sunshine, Lean on Me, right? Help me out, Rory. What other Bill Withers?
Bill Withers. It was Lean on Me, Ain't No Sunshine, and his other big hit,
I'm about to disrespect Bill Withers. I did not know he did Lean on Me.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. A lovely day. Lovely day.
That's it. Yeah. That's a good one.
Okay. So the three that you named were the three
that you knew.
Yeah. So maybe Bill Withers, but I got Lean on Me. I got introduced to that when I was like 13, a group called Tony out of Oakland, California. No, they did. That was no. It was I met these guys down at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. They did Lean on Me.
Wow.
They were independent. They made the first with an independent record. Oh, what were they called? I can't remember their name.
I'll come back.
These guys were much respect.
Right. Yeah. There's another song though that he did that you would know as well. Just the Two of Us. Just the Two of Us.
Oh yeah.
We can make it if we try. Just the two. That's Bill. He wrote all those.
I've totally disrespected Bill Withers today.
Yeah.
I mean that's the thing. A lot of people. No, I mean a lot of people don't know that Bill had these huge hits.
You know what?
But here's the reason.
I only knew him for the Ain't No Sunshine. I knew that one.
Yep.
And that one gets done so much.
Yeah.
And like.
We do it live. I mean, that's
all right. So
even we do it. We don't do a lot of covers, but that is one that we do. And Rory sings it, and it's amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But see, here's the thing. Bill Withers retired in '85. Man, he didn't start singing until he was 32. After almost 10 years in the military, he leaves the army, starts singing at 32 years old. He goes in, has these hits in '71. Right? He ends up having a new label, Columbia. He couldn't stand them. He hated his job there, the guys he had to work with. So he, in '85, when his deal ended up, he was done. And he said that since he had a regular life before he got his record deal, that he never missed the music industry, never missed touring, never missed not being an artist. But think about it. His songs have they kept paying.
Sure.
They still pay it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean,
amazing.
Yeah. So that's why. That's one of the reasons we don't know that he did a lot of those songs that were hits. We know the songs because he left so early on.
Sure.
Yeah. And to counteract that, John Prine at 72 is being nominated for Grammys. He's up for, he was up for 3 Grammys and he's 72 years old.
Wow.
So, kind of like opposites there.
So how much, Alexa, how much John Prine have you listened to in your life? Do you get into like singer-songwriter stuff? Because I don't know if you've heard Alexa too much, Trav. Alexa is very much like banjo, ukulele, you know, some like singer-songwriter vibe. And you know, so folks like, you know, John Prine would seemingly be in your wheelhouse.
Right. And I would... Rory and I have attended Folk Alliance international conferences, and you could put our music on the kind of pop edge of folk. So we kind of stylistically kind of tap into the folk world. Right. And so we've heard the name John Prine through all of those people, but it was never anything that I grew up around or spent. I have not spent time with his music. I have, you know, so I just know the people that he's influenced are more people that I would be more familiar with, like Casey Musgraves or like Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, and Bruce Springsteen.
Sure.
They all like were influenced by him. They would claim that he was a influence in them. So kind of like I feel like I've been influenced by him because in the circles that I'm in, he's mentioned. Sure. But, you know, until we were talking today, it hasn't, you know, his music hasn't been something that I've really dived into.
Sure.
But the more that I learn about him, it's really fun to learn his process and to find ways how he writes songs and how he tells stories and how important stories are to him.
Sure.
But I would say from that list that you mentioned, Kenny Rogers for me would be the most, because my dad grew up playing Kenny Rogers, and his study, his home office shared a wall with my bedroom. And so when he was home, he was playing music all the time.
Wow.
And so I would hear Dolly Parton, Oak Ridge Boys, and Kenny Rogers.
Yeah.
And later I moved to Nashville and I was recording across the hall from Kenny Rogers, and I've met Kenny. Wow. And so that's just
amazing.
Just hearing that he's passed away is kind of crazy.
Did he bring chicken for lunch at the session? Because I mean, he had some pretty good chicken. I understand.
I weren't those. I think those were shut down before
Kenny
he
Rogers
was recording there.
Yeah, they shut it down in Nashville.
Right. No, I think that was no longer in existence when we met him.
Yeah. So
it was post the restaurants.
John Prine seems like he's been around forever and really influenced a lot of amazing people. Bob Dylan said he was the best singer-songwriter he ever met, and so when Dylan's telling you like he's the best singer-songwriter he ever met, that's a big deal. But he's a guy that rarely ever charted. Right. I'm looking for it. I'm just, but I'm trying to see like what his best, like most, like the thing he charted the highest, but it rarely ever was known. It's an interesting thing that you could be so influential and just like nobody even knows really who you are.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of
more his peers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. How can you have such an influence on such incredible artists and writers, and no one knows who you are because you never got radio hits, right? I mean, which is kind of how it was. If we grew up, like Travis was saying, we grew up listening to the radio, what our parents or older siblings were listening to. It wasn't John Prine.
Yeah,
they might have been influenced by him and gotten their lead
fan base. They would think you're crazy for not having, been familiar with his music. And, they tell stories of how his music was played for, my grandpa played that for my dad, and my dad played it for me. And, so, and he had age range of audience. Families have passed it down, his music down. Yeah. So,
well, he wrote some intense things that are known, like Angel from Montgomery. That's pretty well known.
Yeah,
that and also and the song he wrote just after he got out of the military on his first album. It's named after a guy,
Sam Stone.
Sam Stone. I mean, he's written some stuff that's got some disturbing lines, right? All the money runs through the hole in Daddy's arm, or whatever.
Yeah,
you guys like Cat Stevens?
Yes.
So, all right. So maybe it's a dumb question, but I noticed that. So I'm listening to John Prine today, and then I think of like folk songs and singers that I like that would appeal to me. So I'm super in terms of formulating and writing songs. I don't part formulaic, but heavy melody, heavy on like good pop melodies where I mix them into R&B, any type of genre, because I found that that's what like will like cross over to a lot of people, and even the songs I grew up, whether it was a white artist, black artist, someone like Cat Stevens, he was like super melodic. You hear some of his songs and just so when I was listening to John, not that I was listening to I got captivated by someone like where is this going? What's he gonna say? And I was into the Heaven song, and so that intrigued. So story intrigues, but what if you can mix great story with great melody? Then I think that makes.
What was your favorite John Prine song you listened to out of the few that you did?
What was the very first one that you said was the top? It was a slower one, and I think it had the most melody.
Paradise.
No, that was about Kentucky.
I like that
Paradise.
one.
It was, what was that? He was sitting on the stack of hay.
Yeah. What Roy? What's your out of the songs you've listened to? What are your favorite?
There were some lines that jumped out at me, like if dreams were lightning, thunder, desire. This old house would have burnt down long ago. Lines like that. That's from Angel from Montgomery, which is just like what? And the song about the Sam. Oh gosh, I can't. Sam Stone about all the money runs through the hole in Dad's arm, because it's a story about a guy from the Vietnam War. Yeah, or the military, and he was an addict, right?
Sure.
Some just striking lines. I'm a little bit like Travis. For example, the great singer-songwriter you mentioned a minute ago who loves
Johnny Cash.
No, we didn't mention Johnny Cash.
Cat Stevens.
No, keep going back. The guy that can't sing.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan.
We haven't talked about
How
him
did you
yet.
forget Bob Dylan?
No, I didn't. I baited you all.
That's it. That's
my point.
Yeah.
This is my point. I say the guy who can't sing, and you say Bob Dylan, right?
That's it. Yeah,
because
sure.
when I'm like you, Travis.
Alexa said that.
Right? Yeah. Because look, when I was a kid, I didn't like hearing Bob Dylan.
Sure.
I got to be honest with you, because the boy couldn't. I mean, in my opinion, I was like, he can't sing. Why is he on the radio? Right? The older I got, I start appreciating things for different reasons, like the lyrics, and I go, holy cow, this guy's a heck of a writer. I can learn something from this guy. It's not that I want to form my melodies like him, because I'm a bit more of a soulful type guy in that way, and listen to a lot of country music growing up. So also the story thing was really big in my songwriting. But these guys, I didn't turn on to until later, because they didn't have the voices I wanted to listen to.
Sure, that makes sense.
Vocally, but their voice and their writing is huge.
No, I get it. It's interesting when I grew up as I was growing up. I listened before I formulated my own musical taste. I just listened to what my parents listened to, and so I missed all 80s music. I just skipped, because when I was a kid listening to my parents' music, they didn't listen to 80s music. They listened to Dylan, they listened to John Prine, they listened to folks like that, and so I just it was more sort of folk stuff, or even things like Conway Twitty and sort of the old country Waylon Jennings, things like that. So and then by the time that I got into sort of formulating my own musical preferences, that then it was just like the grunge era in the 90s. But I was exposed to John Prine really young. I was probably I remember it was probably 12, 11 maybe, and I saw him. They took my parents took me and my brother and my sister to a concert at the Paramount Arts Center in Ashland, Kentucky, and we watched John Prine. And as a 12-year-old kid, like, it's like a weird concert to go to, right? Because it's not like a concert where anybody's like dancing or jumping up and down or anything. It's just like you're sitting and listening to this guy just play guitar the entire time, and it was really, really super interesting. But it really kind of tuned me into that whole vibe of the singer songwriter. Speaking of Dylan, he just released, I think last week or the week before, a new song that is a 17-minute story
I heard about that,
about the JFK assassination that has no chorus, and it's just like this repeating melody, and 17 minutes. It's like the ultimate storytelling flex of like, I'm old, I'm the best. I'm going to show you guys I can do it better than you. Nobody can do that.
If your song is over
my
5
name
minutes,
is Bob Dylan.
Yeah, if your song's over 5 minutes, you get more royalties anyway.
Sure. So. Well, he just cashed in right there. Yep. So Rory and Alexa, you guys are from Nashville, right? And I was reading about John Prine today. I thought this was really super interesting. He was, and I don't know if you've ever heard this place. He lived in Nashville. And he was famously attended or would go to Arnold's Country Chicken. Arnold's Country Kitchen. Arnold's Country Kitchen.
Yeah, because it was a meat and three.
It's a meat and three.
So I don't know what meat and three is. What is that?
All right, so Arnold's Kitchen, they had awesome fried green tomatoes. I just have to say, they were down on. This is before the revolution, not the revolution, the revitalization of Nashville happened.
Okay.
It's down on 8th Avenue, next to the cannery. You're right down in the cannery. It's in an area that you didn't want to go at night. First of all, not by yourself. Okay. So Arnold's little kitchen had been there forever. I mean, he might have seated 25 people. If you're going to pack in 30 people or something, you go through the line. It's like a little buffet style thing. There's ladies back there with the hairnet. It's like a school cafeteria. It's awesome.
Sure.
They'll have 2 or 3 meats to choose from. You might have pork chops, like fried pork chops, fried chicken, something baked or roast.
Brisket or something.
Brisket. Yeah, you'll have some great down-home Southern meats, right? Southern cooking. And you have these Southern vegetables. You might have some kind of bean, probably not corn. Nobody got in the corn, right?
Sure.
It's green beans. It's greens. They're always greens. Fried green tomatoes.
Lima beans.
Awesome there. Yeah. All this good stuff. So you go through and you literally you can choose to get a meat and 2 vegetables, or a meat and 3 vegetables, or a vegetable plate. And they're all single price. You get 2 vegetables and meat, it's this much. You get 3 and it's this, whatever. And your drink comes with it. And it was awesome, dude.
So meat and 3.
He would go to Arnold's Country Kitchen, and he said he wrote all his best songs in Arnold's Country Kitchen, and he would
probably ate with him and didn't know it.
Probably didn't, and he wrote them all on Tuesdays. Tuesdays was his songwriting days, and when they asked like why he would write all his best songs on Tuesdays in Arnold's Country Kitchen, he says that was Meatloaf Day. And he said they always had the best meatloaf, and so he would go there.
Potatoes.
He would go there on Tuesdays in the morning, and he would give himself the goal. He said it was he called it like the carrot at the end of the stick. He said, "I'm going to write a hit song before they bring out the meatloaf," and he would stay until dinner and then celebrate by eating Arnold's Country Kitchen meatloaf. And there's just such a simplicity to that. Like, it's just like this incredible thing that this world-class songwriter that influenced so many people, Meatloaf from Arnold's Country Kitchen is the thing that motivated him to do it.
So he would sit there, get there in the morning, and then
have coffee, I guess, and wait for lunch.
Right all day, right? Right all day.
Because I didn't know they served breakfast. I don't know that they did.
Maybe
it was always on lunch that I knew of.
Maybe if
that's what I'm saying.
That's it. So
exactly.
Arnold wasn't a young guy either. They might have been buddies.
That's true. He had some really interesting deep lyrics, like you were saying. I mean, he I don't know if you he had a lot of wordplay that was always super interesting, and he was actually a little bit more hooky than Dylan was, I think, musically.
Yeah.
Not his storytelling songs weren't as much, but he had a lot of sort of fun little hooky stuff. He sung a lot about smoking weed and different things like that. They're all they're all fun. But he I remember he was always obsessed with Christmas, and that was one of the things that was cool about him. And the first John Prine thing I ever heard was a Christmas album that he put out, and it was
with his Christmas song.
Yeah, the Christmas song, and he had this really super interesting. And I just have this distinct memory of being a 10, 12-year-old kid. And I remember at night all that the lights were down in the house except for the Christmas tree. It was a Christmas chime. I remember like laying on the couch that we had out by the Christmas tree and listening to his song "Christmas in Prison," and it's a really super interesting, emotional song about somebody celebrating Christmas in prison. And I just have this real distinct memory of that. And it's like, Courtney makes fun of me. My wife makes fun of me all the time just because I have like, she's like, no other 12-year-olds doing weird stuff like that.
Wow.
But
see, I think that works though, because if you don't have like I was saying a bit earlier that I get attracted to melody, strong vocals, but really the melody first. But then there's certain things that can make up. If you have some great lyrics, it doesn't have to be super melodic. And you have a story within the song, because people are so primed and want story, and a story can hook you, and you'll forget about what you're listening to because you're trying to get to the end of the story. That's a cool thing. That's a cool trick for any artist to use if you need to get people to go through your song, or if you don't have the strongest vocals in the world, you just embed story.
Sure.
I think it's a cool tactic, strategy, if you will.
Yeah, right. Because in the case with, like, as we've talked about, John Prine, he had cancer in his lungs, and things have affected his vocal cords and things like that. And then Dylan, his voice having such a unique quality, but it not being like the best voice you've ever heard kind of thing. In their case, story trumps vocal.
Sure, of course.
Right?
Yeah. Right. So if you go back and listen to a lot of early Dylan stuff, I mean, Dylan, his very first album, it's rare that he ever uses a chorus, right? He just has sort of an instrumental melody that just repeats, but it goes from verse to verse to verse, just telling the story, and there's no need for a chorus, right? And it's just kind of weird to get used to that. But what I'm interested in is just from a non-songwriter perspective. And Alexa, like you mentioned earlier, that you're pretty vague when you poetic, maybe is a better way to say that. When you write, but
thank you.
I've been reading a lot of John Prine lyrics, and he was very, as Dylan was, very very on the nose with the stuff, and maybe it's just like the folk genre. In general, maybe that has more to do with it. But he wrote a song, when I get to heaven, right? So I honestly hope he is in heaven. That would be awesome. But he says, when I get to heaven, I'm going to shake God's hand, thank him for more blessings than one man can stand. Then I'm going to get a guitar and start a rock and roll band, check into a swell hotel, ain't the afterlife grand. And then I'm going to get a cocktail, a vodka and a ginger ale. I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm going to kiss that pretty girl in the tilt-a-whirl because this old man is going to go to town. It's interesting. Like there's a poetry to it, but it's like very on the nose, right? And even Travis, if you go back and listen to one of my, I think, master storytellers in completely different genres, Notorious B.I.G. There's a lot of very on the nose lyrics, right? That I don't know if it's because of like clarity purposes in the story, but if you go back and listen to these songs that tell stories, it seems very sort of straightforward. What do you guys think? I mean, you think that is sort of part and parcel of telling an effective story in a song?
Sometimes, right? But like, for example, there's a great line in his Angel from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old radio. She's talking about, she wants to be made into a poster of an old radio. Just give me one thing I can hold on to.
Sure.
And I was like, wait, what does that mean? And I imagine a poster stapled to a telephone pole, right? At least the poster has something to hold on to.
Sure.
One thing, a wall, whatever. And I was like, okay, that was not straightforward at all.
Right.
But it was incredibly poetic, and it makes you, and you have to think about it. And it's one of his biggest songs ever, right?
Sure.
And some of the other lines are much more visceral and straightforward, but I think it sort of depends. Travis, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if you're going to tell a story, it's totally opinion. If you have a beautiful song, right? This isn't a story-based song. You have a beautiful song, and you want to wow the guy or the girl, and you can make it very poetic and make people guess the metaphors. That's a fun thing to do in a song, right? And then you have story. To me, and my goal is when I'm trying to get, I really want the story to be ingested, digested, and have this story experience. So I go, I go straight in, tell the story. I pick out the best words in it.
So you're not trying to also obfuscate with the poetry. You're taking more of the Dylan folk artist. Let's just tell you what it is, and the plain meaning of the word.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like Notorious B.I.G., he would, on certain songs, he would get really prolific with his wordplay and the similes and metaphors, and then and he would still use the simile and metaphors in the some of his stories, but he would just tell you, birthdays, talking about his rise as a sin up. You want to hear about that. Yeah, you want to say, yeah, birthdays was the worst days for me. And two, I get it. I've been there. So I think when you're coming straight forward like that, what you're looking for and what you're creating is commonality, homophily, if you will.
I think I think there's depends as a songwriter, what do you want your song to accomplish and what is the purpose for it? If you are writing for TV film, they want songs that are going to be more vague and kind of just give a general emotion, because they don't want your story song to distract from the story in the movie.
100%.
And so if you're going to write for TV film, kind of the rule is we're not going to include as much story. We're going to give you some emotion and we're going to paint some pictures, but we're not going to necessarily tell the story.
Yeah, that's if you're pitching something to film and TV, right? Not if you're specifically writing for a specific film or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, if they commission you to write for the film, you're most likely going to take that approach anyway. So the other thing, it's a fine line, because your story needs to be believable. Your story has to be universal. It has to have something that everyone can relate to at some point in some way. Ideally, like if you want a commercially successful, story song, you want it to be believable. You want it to be universal. You want it to be conversational. Like you and I, all four of us, we are all just talking. We're just having a conversation. We're not all going to sudden say, your hair is, well, I can't even think backwards to do it. Let's see. So if I want to say the sentence, Rory, I saw you being sad. You wouldn't say being sad, Rory, I saw you.
Yeah, unless you're Yoda.
But if you need it in right.
He totally pulls it off.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't be Yoda. Like that's the songwriting rule, right? Don't be Yoda just to have a rhyme that I need something that goes with ooh, so I'm going to write a sentence backwards so that I get a rhyme.
Sure.
So it's got to be conversational. So that's the other thing with your story. But I think like the other thing that is for me like one of the hardest things and one of where the true craft really, really comes in is you've got to show so much detail and you've got to be so specific, but you can't be so specific that you alienate everybody.
What does it mean? What do you mean?
That you start to, and I meant to talk to you about this, Rory, so you could think of an example, because I'm horrible at thinking of examples.
Okay.
But you don't want to be so specific that, like, okay, so if I want to talk about my cat Ellie, who has a really big belly, if I talk about how she's lopsided just on the left side, and I go into like this weird detail about, her left side is bigger than her right side, like, I don't know, like nobody's going to care or relate to that. But
it's funny.
You could talk about my fat cat, and maybe you could talk about you could tell the story about your fat cat, how she wobbles and she walks a little funny because her, she's big in the tummy, whatever. I don't know. You can, maybe Roy has a better example, but if you get too specific where people just like, no, I can't relate to that. I've never had my left pinky cut off.
But you know what?
Well,
I get what you're saying. But even though, maybe your example, though, because when you were describing the cat and then you said the lump on the side, if someone was saying that, I'm thinking, wow, this person, like say if this person was depressed and and you bring the lump in the side and as a refrain, is like, then it actually does work because you're like, it's so descriptive.
It's and visceral, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I do get what you're saying, Alexa.
See, since you brought it up, like writing for film and TV, they, not to be too specific, is really hard for me because, like you, Travis, when I'm telling a story, I want the story to come across, and as a songwriter, I tend to lean into the story side of it.
Right.
The human experience, consider it's not extremely broad when it comes to our emotions. Okay, there are, let's say, 7 to whatever it is. We learned this in acting school. 7 to 9 major emotions, right? That everyone experiences, and every little thing can pretty much fall into these ballparks.
Sure.
Well, with songwriting,
so you've got like happy, sad, angry,
on
lonely,
top of the world,
that type
things,
of
right? So when you really want to connect with someone in a story, just a story, forget songwriting for a minute, you've got to connect with an emotion in this person
100%.
to really engage them and get them involved. Even if it's talking about your cat's big fat side or whatever, you've got to find a way to tie it in to access the emotion of the person. That's what always drew me in, whatever the story of the song might have been. And it could even be a happy emotion, right? It could be a funny song.
Sure.
I mean, my cat with a big belly who wobbles when she walks.
Well, first of all, Alexa,
I actually have a song called Silly Me, and it's actually about a cat. And so we have a cat song, and we've had so many people relate to it and love it. And it's slave all day, work away. You just eat and sleep. Silly me. What have I been thinking?
Sure.
Before I drop, need to stop. Learn to be like you. Just sit and be silly me. And it's the whole story of how a cat gets to lay around all day, and they're not worried about deadlines. They're not worried about all of these things.
Yeah.
And and we're kind of specific in what those things are.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have a cat, we found people like that song. They connect with it. So
and it could be a double entendre for somebody's like husband.
Right?
I
don't know who. I don't know if I've
not my husband.
One of my favorite, one of the best, I think, the master class, the gold standard. Maybe not the gold standard. One of the gold standard storytelling songs that comes to my mind is Hotel California, right? So by the Eagles, and classic song. And it's interesting when you just read the lyrics without the music. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair. Warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell, and I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. She lit up the candle, showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say, "Welcome to Hotel California." Right? So that's pretty. I feel like that's pretty. That's pretty on the nose. How would you rewrite that, Alexa, to make it maybe a little bit more poetic?
Mention a cat.
Like stylistically, because when you hear it, it doesn't feel that on the nose, but when you just read the lyrics, it's pretty plain, right? Which is kind of interesting. If I guess there's a balance maybe between the two, and it probably also depends on your personal style, right?
Right. And that's my point. Like, it's really hard to find that fine line between having so much detail and being very, very specific, because it's those specifics that help stir the emotion.
Sure.
And so regardless of like what Rory's saying, that's how one way that to be universal is that you share the emotion, because everybody has emotions.
Gotcha.
Not everybody grew up in the same way. Not everybody has all the same exact experiences. Not everybody has the same family situation, but we all have emotions.
Right.
And so we can tap into them. And so those specifics and those details are what do that. And it's just that finding the fine line of being way too specific that it is completely unrelatable.
Yeah.
100%. And so as a songwriter, that's or even, maybe as just a general storyteller, it's I think it's more for songs though, because you have to fit the song into 3 minutes.
Sure.
And so
unless you're Bob Dylan.
Unless you're Bob Dylan and you're writing a 17-minute song.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's a pretty cool. I mean, what the songwriters from the Bob Dylans, John Prines, and people that I don't get into, the people who I do get into. It's an amazing thing to fit story in 3 minutes. Find the right words, because sometimes you can't put all the words in there, all the syllables in there. Things that rhyme, sometimes you don't rhyme, and that's phenomenal. And if you think, like, I think one of the greatest writers, storytellers, when you go to genre, definitely Eminem. I just marvel at when he described, when he said, knees weak, palms are sweaty, there's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. He was really just, I mean, and he's nervous, and then he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. I mean, he just when you listen to that song, you're like, this guy just hit those emotions, like you're saying, Alexa, can relate to so many people in a nervous situation when you're trying to go for something. But then you enjoyed it so much because he painted this picture so eloquently, and you're like, you could see the guy, you could see the beads of sweat on his forehead, even though he never mentioned it. That's how good he did.
And I've never had spaghetti on. I've never thrown up spaghetti on my sweater, so that's not something that I've personally experienced. But yet he painted a picture, and I'm like, oh, okay. You just drew a picture for me, and now I'm looking at your picture, and I'm engaging in your picture, and I'm feeling that emotion and connecting with that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. There was I don't know if you guys ever heard of Billy Currington. Billy Currington is sort of like a Nashville hitmaker, right? And he has a couple really good story songs. One's called "Good Directions," and just reading the lyrics right here, it says, "I was sitting there selling turnips on a flatbed truck, crunching on a pork rind when she pulled up. She had to be thinking, this is where rednecks come from. She had Hollywood written on her license plate. She was lost and looking for the interstate." Right? Needing directions, and I was the man for the job. I told her, way up yonder past the caution light, there's a little country store with an old Coke light. You got to stop and ask Miss Bell for some sweet tea. Then a left will take you to the interstate, but a right will bring you right back here to me. Very, very sort of plain spoken. Travis, what do you think? Do you think that storytelling from, like, going back to Kenny Rogers, going back to Bob Dylan, John Prine, to Bill and Currington today, maybe someone like Blake Shelton with some of his songs, Old Red and things like that. Do you think that just like folk and country sort of genre wise just lend itself a little bit better to stories? Or I mean, obviously there's some good storytellers in other genres, but why is it so prolific, do you think, in country music?
Well, I think, for one, universally, we all love, dig, and fall into stories, the story traps somehow. But I think the ones that you're talking about within the folk genre and country, it comes down to culture. I was watching Winter's Bone, and there's a scene where the lady's in there singing with her family, and it was so real, and you can imagine that happening in all the hollers in Kentucky a lot. And she was actually it was a story-based song, and it had a good melody, so I even got into it. It was pretty cool. So I think when you grow up like that, and I was going to ask you why your parents got into Dylan, because you said they were playing that, but there's a reason why they were doing that and not the pop stuff. So I want to ask that, but I'll save that question. But I think a culture has a heck of a lot to do with it. You grow up on songs like that. You grow up on talking about pickup truck coming. You want to hear that. Again, you get used to story. Hey, what's the story? What's the story? And then so you get addicted to that. So that's why I think everybody in those genres are people who live in certain areas, and people who live in the South. They grew up with that. They were introduced to that. It's part of their fiber.
When you read that lyric about the pork rind, I'm like, okay, you went real specific, and you definitely took it's taking your brand there, because you mentioned pork rind. You're not gonna. Someone up north probably is not going to know what that is.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, and growing up in South Louisiana, immediately I was there with you. I was there at the truck. Because growing up where I grew up, it's
interesting, right? Like it's interesting. We one, your target market, right? And then, but then two, like that whole song is about sort of a girl that gets away, and maybe if you've never eaten a pork rind, maybe it taps into that emotion of like I can relate to that, even though I'm sure it wasn't an organic pork rind, Alexa. So probably would be Alexa.
Do you know that?
But
They even sell vegan, like fake pork rinds, by the way.
Okay, yeah, pork-ish.
I'm just telling you, and I have never tried one because that has no appeal to me whatsoever.
That's it. So Trav, with people like I think Kendrick Lamar is a tremendous storyteller in hip hop. I think Chance the Rapper's really good as well. Like, who do you see like in other genres outside of that country or folk genre? Who are you impressed by the most?
Well, the Eminem is probably one of my best storytellers. I think the number one storytelling genre and what lends itself to it, because you can fit so many syllables in, you can do so much, is hip hop, and everyone's telling their story of how they made it out of the hood, because that right there, that culture was a rough culture. You want to know how you went from what's your rags to riches story. Why are you selling drugs? And they want to talk about that. So that whole genre also, much like folk, there's a lot of stories. What we're going on, you had the 60s and you had all kinds of these stories. They tell the story of the turmoil that was going on in. Hip hop tells a story of the urban culture. And so everybody has their story. And so you want to hear that stuff because you want to relate to it. Someone's speaking for me. So I love when Tupac tells, like I like the classics like the Tupac, Notorious. I like Eminem. Some of the newer guys like Kendrick are great. And then I don't listen to I haven't seen too many brand new hip hop artists. Seems like there's maybe a lack of storytelling. It's all about like twerk or a vibe. I'm just not getting into it. There's not a lot of depth. There's some out there, but not a lot that I'm finding.
Sure.
I mean, like the guys you're talking about, they're for me, it interests me because it's like an origin story from a great movie, right?
Yeah.
I love those things. So I want to hear it, right?
Sure.
What
I think is interesting from the hip hop storytelling angle is that I think there is sort of, especially sort of that origin story aspect of it. I think that's why probably a lot like the first albums really hit well. And then you have like this drop off in like the second, third albums because the story's already told. And so but what I find is interesting just from a storytelling perspective is how fictional storytelling in folk and country music is, and even in pop music with Taylor Swift and some of the things that she does, is very, very prevalent. But like now listen, I don't know if everything that Notorious B.I.G. rapped about was real or not, but it seems like there's this hesitancy in hip hop to tell fictional stuff. Whereas like, Johnny Cash never killed a man in Reno just to watch him die. He never did that. Right. Like, when Kenny Rogers sang about the coward of the county, like that's a fictional story. It never happened. Right. And nothing that Dylan ever, Dylan did tell one really good story of Hurricane Walker. That was real, but most of his stuff was just like weird dreams that he had at night that he wrote about. So why do you think there's like a hesitancy to tell fictional stories in hip hop when it's so prevalent in other genres?
I think some of them get real fictional when after they do make it and they get the record deal. They say they have more money. They say they have more money than they do, but there's some fiction going on there.
It's a different kind of fiction. That's just lying. That's just lying.
Or they'll
Facebook.
Or they'll say that they're real gangster and they went to private school. No, you didn't. You were gangster.
That's awesome.
But I will say that sometimes it's just a challenge, and I challenge anyone listening now and anyone who will listen to me later on from an R&B artist to hip hop artist. Tell those fictional stories. You're creative, and if you're trying to capitalize, and since record sales are low and you have to make money through touring, but now there's coronavirus, you can't tour. What if you tell more stories, then those stories can extend into books and comic books and webisodes, and then you have this brand. So I challenge every artist. Of all genres, but especially some of these Black artists who think like, no, I'm not going to make up some story. No, there's people who have pulled it off, and people love a good story.
Yeah.
a good problem, a good
Always.
feat that has to be conquered, and I think they could do it more, and their careers would be better off for it.
Well, case in point, well, one, I agree with you. And the only example I could have off the top of my mind was when Jay-Z went and did his American Gangster record and told the story of Frank Lucas. I think better than the film, right? And you know, Jay-Z wasn't gangster at the time, but he's told the story of a gangster that wasn't him, which I thought was interesting. Kid Cudi is doing a really interesting thing now, where he's doing an entire album. Then there's a Netflix series where there's going to be 30-minute episode to sort of extend the stories that are in his in one of the songs. But the I don't know if you guys watched Dolly Parton Heartstrings on Netflix. And it's really interesting what I watched the first episode of that, and every episode is inspired by a Dolly Parton song. And so the very first episode is called Jolene, and you guys have heard sort of that famous song Jolene, and which is the whole from the perspective of a woman begging Jolene, another woman, not to take her husband, right?
Leave my man alone.
That's it, right? What's super interesting, just from a transmedia perspective, is when you go and watch the first episode of Dolly Parton's Heartstrings, the episode of Jolene, it's actually from Jolene's perspective. And when you see the whole story from Jolene's perspective, she's not trying to take the dude at all. The dude's coming on to her, right? And she's just getting the blame. From, he's telling the wife some different stuff, right? Which is kind of interesting, right? So quickly before we wrap up, what's your favorite storytelling song, if you can think of one? What's one that really gets you going?
Before we do that, can I jump on something Travis said?
100%.
Because, okay, thank you. Just because another case in point of what you said is how John Prine wrote. He liked to try to do a word per syllable.
Yeah.
And he said that was the old Chuck Berry way of writing. Mm-hmm. And so having a lot of, he wanted to make sure that every syllable had some kind of word going to it. But he also approached his songs with getting an article, like some kind of physical object, and then building a character around it, and then introducing the story. And he said, once you've introduced those two things, the object and the character, then you can build a story around it.
Interesting.
But what I wanted to say, to jump on what you were saying about fictional stuff, he got a lot of his inspiration from just reading the newspaper.
Right.
So a lot of a story that someone would tell him.
Yeah.
And so a lot of his songs, he's created this huge career, being able to be still touring at 72, 73 years old.
Not anymore.
Right.
Sorry.
But at 72 and 73, he's touring.
Yeah.
And a lot of that career is based on stories that he probably didn't experience, but he heard or he read on the paper, or let that inform something. So I just kind of want to just piggyback on what 100%. Travis said, to say, yes, it's not a bad thing to go for that and write that story. Write a good story.
One of his most famous songs is called Dear Abby. And it's just all about sort of that Dear Abby column in the newspaper. And every verse is sort of a different Dear Abby letter. And it's really pretty funny, right? But yeah, literally that's directly from the newspaper, right? So
that's great.
Interesting thing. So
wow.
So what storytelling song that really connects with you, that you love? I'm sure we could make a list, but if we could, what do you think? Anybody?
Yeah, man, to narrow it down to one song is tough. A guy who pops into my head as an artist is Billy Joel. We haven't talked about him, but that boy can tell a story, especially his early stuff. She's Always a Woman to Me. Man, just some stuff that Mr. Bojangles.
Mr. Bojangles is great.
Some things some things that really caught me as a little kid. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this. You don't know why, but it's because the story connected with the emotion, like Travis was talking about. You've got the great melody, you've got a great story, you've got the emotion that pulls you in.
Sure.
And for me, as a kid, I think growing up, I cut my teeth on a lot of country music. But other than that, I would say Billy Joel was a huge influence on the way I feel, if that makes sense, about writing story songs.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's good. I like that. I'll accept that answer. That was good. That was
okay.
good. Alexa, what do you think?
Top of my head stories are, you know, I'm going to go more towards Carrie Underwood, Taylor Swift type. You know, there's a lot of stories that I wouldn't say this is my favorite song of all time or anything, but Jesus Take the Wheel is one that just pops out as like story song. Here's the story and a chorus that you can connect with no matter what you're going through.
Right.
And then second verse, I'm going to continue the story and take it into a new place. It's just a very well written story in a 3-minute period.
Sure.
With a great message. And
her first big hit.
So I would probably go, So I would probably go to those artists to look for some great stories that are, you know,
commercial
commercial and hooky and happy.
Mm-hmm. I love it. What about you, Trav?
I'm gonna mention one of my favorite country songs. I think it's Tim McGraw. Does Tim McGraw sing "Don't Take the Girl"?
Oh, that's a great song.
The girl.
Man, yeah. We used to say "Don't take the squirrel," but I get
it. I love that. That got me into country because I did not like country at all. So I love that country.
That tells a story.
Tells some great stories. Yeah.
Tim McGraw. Yeah. Tim McGraw.
Yeah.
That is a great
story about like God. Don't take. Oh, it's awesome. And then there's this other slow song. I mean, hands down, amazing story. I'm a Christian, but and this song's about adultery, but it's real. It's by it's Shirley Murdoch, and I would challenge everyone to go listen to it. It's just this old 80s song. And it came out right after my mother passed away. I moved back to Ohio, and I was like 13, and I would ride and just wait for that song to come on. I'm like, please, my favorite song's got to come on. And this lady, she's now this born-again Christian, sings gospel music, but you could tell that she was supposed to be gospel back then. She could blow. She was the first one, like, showed me how to riff. It captivated me. But she talks about, she says, it's morning, sunlight shines across your sleeping face. It happened. Now we can't turn back the hands of time. And it's talking about, like, she knows that they did wrong, and he should go home to his wife. And it tells this amazing, this crazy story. It is R&B song, and it's slow. It's got the word. It's got the word. Like, see, when I produce music, I always like to hear, like, there's an instrumentation where there's the prettiness of a guitar. It could be the voice, or it could be like what they call a worm in R&B music, or a flute or a whistle. And if you put it at the right frequency, note, and melodic, that instrumentation can always create emotion, even if it wasn't there. So it introduces that. That's when I first got into the worm. So now when I produce, I'm like, hey, give me that worm. So my producers know what I'm talking about. Give me the emotion. Make the song cry. You got to make the song cry.
Kind of sounds inappropriate, Trav.
Nice.
You need a steel guitar.
Give me that worm.
That's it. What about you, Alexa? So you had okay, cool. Like you guys had some good ones. For me, like I had a few. It was tough to kind of nail down. You guys ever heard of the old Randy Travis song? Randy Travis was a great storyteller in his own right. 3 Wooden Crosses. You remember? You heard that song, 3 Wooden Crosses?
Oh, it's been a long time.
I only got into him because he had my name. I'm serious. That's it.
It's a really iconic voice. 3 Wooden Crosses is this tremendous story. I love that one. I loved A Boy Named Sue, I think by Johnny Cash. So it was tremendous.
Oh,
one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. House the Rising Sun, love that one. Colder Weather by the Zac Brown Band, I think is really good. But I think there's a lot of Dylan stuff that's kind of hard to kind of pare down. But he has a couple epics that he told that were really good. Hurricane and Joey, which was like a mobster tale that is like 12 minutes long. It's pretty good. For like the ability to just sort of like nail a story in 3.5 minutes, Willie Nelson and Ray Charles did a song called 7 Spanish Angels that I think is one of the most emotional, like cool interesting, transmediatable stories that I've heard, and it's just that blend of Willie Nelson and Ray Charles executes it really well too.
Yeah,
but the storytelling of that song is so awesome, and not too many people cover it. Like that's like a very uncovered song. And
yeah,
have you guys heard that one? That's a really good one. Seven Spanish Angels.
I'm a huge fan of both of them, but I can't believe I can't.
You've never heard the song?
It's not coming to mind.
Oh wow. Okay.
Man.
Well, yeah, that's your homework, Trav. You need to go.
Yeah, no
listen to that one too. That's
okay.
It's good.
Hey, and a shout out to Joe Diffie, story songs. John Deere Green. I don't know if you guys remember that song.
It's a great one.
I used to sing that all the time, memorize. So Help Me Girl,
Sure.
Cross genres.
Yeah.
Huge song for him. Pickup Man. I mean, he had some really good story songs that he wrote.
Sure.
So anyway, we were talking about him earlier. We mentioned all these other guys, but Joe Diffie, he had some good story songs going as well.
No, he didn't mention this whole time was who I loved and had some good melodic ones is Paul Simon. If you be my bodyguard,
yes,
yeah.
So
that
Paul
was like,
Simon.
Yeah. So Paul
Absolutely.
Simon, if you want to hear like a tremendous Paul Simon record album, he did an album, entire concept album called Songs from the Cape Man, that is sort of this Puerto Rican infused sort of really interesting kind of a Hispanic vibe to the music, but he tells across 14, 15 tracks, he tells the true story of a serial killer, but in this really fun Spanish Harlem kind of like doo-woppy way. But it's really super interesting, called Songs from the Cape Man. So yes, wow. Paul Simon is like legitimate great story. He tried to turn it
dark.
He tried to turn it into a play in the 80s, and it was terrible. It didn't work, but the story was definitely the real deal. So
good call, Travis. Paul Simon.
Yeah.
Paul Simon.
Of course, Dolly Parton.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Yes.
Well,
I should have mentioned my aunt. Come on, give me a break.
Right.
Aunt Dolly.
And I think in sort of modern pop music, Ed Sheeran's great. I mean, obviously, Taylor Swift.
Yeah, he is.
Ed Sheeran is like, he's the real deal. And a lot of good. I have this ongoing playlist on my iTunes. I'm looking at it now. But it's called Story Songs, and every time I hear a song that tells a story, I just throw it in the same playlist, and it's just right now it's 18 and a half hours long.
Wow. Yeah, I was gonna say,
but
man,
one of my great one is
shows there's a demand for it.
And the one of my favorite John Prine songs, I think, is Paradise. Obviously has a little Kentucky shout out, which is kind of cool. He played a concert in Kentucky with a guy named Sturgill Simpson, and I don't know if Sturgill Simpson is sort of a new country artist. He has coronavirus, by the way, which is a bummer. I hope Sturgill Simpson doesn't die too.
Wow.
And Sturgill Simpson's from Kentucky as well. But they performed Paradise together. But there's also another Kentucky song by Kathy Mattea called "You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive," which is about this dark song about coal mining. That's really cool. And I've listened to a lot.
Wow. Well, and there's a tie-in to Paradise where they hauled the place he wanted to go away. Yeah, in a coal train. So I sang with Kathy Mattea when I lived in Nashville, by the way.
Really? That's super awesome.
Yeah.
Isn't
that fun? It's a televised Christmas special or something.
Trev, I love it how Rory and Alexa's they've been like Nashville name dropping the entire time they've been on here. Getting pictures of Kenny Rogers singing with Kathy Mattea, eating at Arnold's. I love it. That's awesome. That's legit.
Yeah.
But,
I interrupted you on your playlist. What were you going to say about your playlist?
Oh, that was.
Or did you say?
I've been pretty much. I was going to read a couple of these down there. Sonora's Death Row is tremendous. Metallica has a lot of really good story songs too, from the metal. A lot of dark, weird stuff, but really. You ever heard that Bobby Bear song, Rory, called Marie Laveau? About a swamp witch in the bayou.
I know of it.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a
know
great
it.
one. You need to.
I know of it.
Look at all y'all songwriters. I know more of these songs than you.
You do.
That's y'all too busy writing songs. I'm too busy listening to songs.
That's
the difference.
Right?
Well,
right?
and that's one thing I learned about John Prine, which is it made me feel much more good about myself, much better about myself, because he said that he didn't more gooder.
Love it.
The way he would write is someone would teach him a guitar chord, and then so once he knew 2 chords, then he would go home and write that. He wouldn't go and write with those 2 chords. He didn't go learn other people's music. Sure. He would write his his stuff as soon as more chords he learned, then he would add and he could write. And so I was so glad I'm not the only one who
doesn't listen to music 24/7.
Right.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's a good success.
I do my own thing.
Millionaires, billionaires will always tell you to, when you have a goal, a business or anything you want to start at 70%. You'll never get to 100%. So you got those 2 chords. Start. It's good enough to make the song. You got
to get started. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's it. All right. So to cap it off, Trav, I think Rory and Alexa are going to do a little duet for us in honor of in honor of John Prine. Alexa has to travel to Liberty Square.
Wait, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know. Wow,
nice.
That was fast. That was amazing.
Check it
that
out.
was amazing. So this is
when
in
you want
honor.
A woman, you call it woman.
This is in honor of John Prine.
Because I moved it. I can pull the banjo down if you want.
Dude, do it. Let's do it, man. We're already here. Let's move it.
She gave me the look. I better not.
That's it.
Just gave me a look.
I would love.
We're just gonna sing it. It's good.
That's good. It's fine.
Go ahead,
no. You'll probably have to tune the banjo, and it takes too long. And
and it doesn't matter if you tune a banjo. It's still.
Trav, you know how it is when you play banjos. Trav, you know how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just.
Hey, look. As an aside, you guys have heard of Bela Fleck?
Yeah.
One of the greatest banjo players in the world, right? Sure. He's married to one of the greatest as well. So Bela Fleck, he's from he lived in Nashville, and he went to the mall. His banjos cost like thousands of, $10,000, whatever, a lot of money, right? A lot more than this banjo. He goes to the mall in Nashville. He ought to know better. He takes one of his really expensive banjos and leaves it in the back seat while he's running to the mall to make an exchange. He's not going long. He comes back out. Both the back windows been busted out in his car. And the back seat is full of banjos.
Wow. That's an amazing
They left him?
story.
The back seat was full of banjos.
Oh, I get it. You cut out for a second. Now I get it. Okay. Wow.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I missed the punchline there. You froze for a second. I didn't get it. That's
shoot.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Dang it.
I got it. No, yeah.
Okay.
My internet connection ruined your joke.
Is a prop.
All right. Well, I won't play this. It's gonna be too loud. It's really loud banjo. All right. Here we go.
We are doing this song because it's a John Prine song.
And it's fun chorus.
I love it.
The whole song.
He's my baby, and I'm his honey. Never gonna let him go. In spite of ourselves, we'll end up sitting on a rainbow. Against all odds, honey, we're big door pride. We're gonna spy. I know it's right off of our faces. There won't be nothing but big old hearts in our eyes. In spite of ourselves, we'll end up sitting on a rainbow. Against all odds, honey, we're big door pride. We're gonna spy. I know it's right off of our faces. There won't be nothing but big old hearts dancing in our eyes. We're gonna spy. We're gonna spy. I know it's right off of our faces. There won't be nothing but big old hearts dancing in our eyes.
Look at there. Trav, I was ready for you to jump in and harmonize, Trav. I was waiting for you to throwing that R&B harmony.
I was really captivated in the fact that see what happens when I was listening to Alexa and the melody and the tone and her voice and then the blend. I'm like, see that? that was like the best rendition of a John Prine song that I heard, and the difference was the vocal. See,
that's it. That's
no disrespect, John Prine, great guy, but
we're supposed to be honoring John Prine.
I know. I'm just saying, when they sang it, I was like all into it. And I could see them, and I could see them. I watched The Notebook last night with my wife, and I could see them rowing, and Alexa and Rory singing that song. And oh man,
come on, man. It's real. It got real up in here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Listen, guys, I appreciate it. We've kept it all long enough. This is a really great roundtable discussion on songwriting in general, and then particularly the tragedy of losing these great legends of Kenny Rogers and John Prine, Joe Diffie, and Bill Withers. And so hopefully we don't lose any more anytime soon. But I appreciate you guys giving your wisdom and your insight into the songwriting process.